All right. New episode. Another quick kind of update episode. I just pulled this off, but I just wanted to show where we're at right now. So I have the engine pretty much completely disassembled. The whole front is off, oil pumps off. I did drop the oil pan to get to the cam retainer plate because I wanted to I just figured it'd make it a whole lot easier, and that involved removing the oil pan, which isn't really too hard, especially with where I'm at in the disassembly, that it was pretty much just a few extra bolts to kind of pop that off again. I wasn't a fan of the RTV that I bought. I could not find the AC Delco RTV that I typically use. Probably due to the strike or whatever, but I couldn't find it at where I normally buy parts, so I ended up using another style that they sold. I believe it was a Dana product, but wasn't really a fan with it, with how it's sealed. It just didn't feel like it's sealed as well as the AC Delco. I was able to find a couple tubes of the AC Delco, so I figured I'd pull it off. That way I could pull the timing assembly off easily and pull the oil pump, and I'll redo that seal. So as you can see right now, I have the valley cover off. You could see where I have plugged the DOD for the DOD delete when I did the cam swap way early. I think I even have that installed already in episode 1. But took it down to this point just to double check some things for the oiling issue. Kind of want to give a quick update of where we're at. So I did pull the cam out, not all the way, but just enough to kind of, I could inspect the bearing surface through the cuts in the block of all 5 lobes. So I checked that out. I didn't see any abnormal wear, and I did not hear a bearing come out indicating that it had spun and had caused some damage and was no longer in the block. I can't pull the cam all the way out. I just don't have the room without pulling radiator and some other stuff. But I inspected enough that I am pretty sure that I did not spin a cam bearing, which could have blocked off an oil passageway and cause some oil issues. The cam actually all looks good. It looks like it's getting lubricated fine. I don't know how far I covered in the last video. I'm trying to remember, but basically everywhere I've pulled apart has shown me signs of oil getting there. The lifters were all oiled really well. Basically everything but the top of the heads, indicating that it's not going up the push rods. So pulled the cam retainer plate. You know what? I had actually taken those back inside. Let me grab those and I'll pick back up. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at these cam retainer plates. So this one right here is the one that was in the truck. I have cleaned it up, but as you can see, our gasket is pretty smushed down. This is what seals the kind of lifter channel of where oil goes to the lifters. It's pretty similar to the LS, but Gen 5 LT is pretty much the exact same. So there's 2 channels each side. The cam would basically be here, and at the top each way of the cam there's a valley or a channel of sorts that's bored through, and the oil travels through there. That's what gives it access to the lifters, and then the lifters pump it up the push rods, and that's how you get oil to the top of the heads, the top sides of the valves, and the trunnions and the rockers, and all that's lubricated that way. So as you can see, the old one here, it's very flat. I mean, I can't even barely feel it going like this. This is the new one. You can see how much taller that is. So this was likely an issue. It likely might have been bleeding off some oil and not keeping it in the channels, but it's not that bad. I mean, it's bad. I'm going to be replacing it. I do have a new one, but I don't know if this was enough to cause oil to not pump up the push rods. So this was kind of where I started kind of going down a rabbit hole. I've had a couple people tell me that they've had issues where the lifters were the issue and basically were kind of blocking off oil from getting to the bottom of the push rod and actually pushing up the push rods. I've been investigating that a little. The only way to really test a lifter is to get a lifter leak down test, which everyone I've found has been $300 or more. That's just not... That just doesn't seem economical to me because I'm not a shop. I don't sit here and I don't work and build engines all day long where I'll be testing several, 100 lifters in a year. So $300 just to test, 16 lifters for a one-time thing is $300 just doesn't really make sense to me. So what I did is rather than spend the $300 on that, I just went ahead and bought new lifters. So they're in here. I went with an upgraded lifter over what I had already had. So those that don't know, I covered it earlier. I had the LS7, or actually these are the Cadillac. They call them the Caddy lifters. They're Chevy Racing performance parts. They are used on I believe the LSA, in the Cadillac CTS-V back in the day with the LS platform. These are LS lifters. You can run LS lifters if you do a DOD delete in the Gen 5 LT. Basically, any cam kit you look up, it's gonna have LS lifters in the kit. So these were basically the second best tier of the cam kit that I bought. They seem pretty good. I've taken a few of them apart. You can take these apart. It's not that complicated, but you basically, you pop this out and you could take all the pieces out from the inside and kind of inspect them. I've inspected a few of them. They all seem okay, but without being able to do a proper leak down test, I'm not really going to know whether or not this is my issue. So rather than deal with that or buy a $300 tester, I just put the $300 towards some Johnson. So these are Johnson 2110Rs. That was kind of the top tier of the cam kit that I bought. They're supposed to allow me to still run the same push rod length. Looking at my rockers, here's a rocker here. You can kind of see it's getting pretty central wear, indicating that it does not look like my push rod length was off. I think I've got a good shot of that. You can see the wear of how it was riding on the valve is pretty centered in that. So we're going to call the push rod length good. So going to those lifters, they're soaking in oil right now. I'm getting this thing ready to start reassemble. I've already cleaned the heads. I've kind of cleaned a lot of parts. I still got to clean. That's the front cover. I've actually inspected my trunnions. There was some wear in there. I mean, it wasn't abnormal. It didn't seem like issues from possibly not being oiled. I'm suspecting my oiling issue was not a long-term thing and just kind of occurred when I kind of parked this and actually had the pressure drop. But I did take a bunch of these apart, inspected them, inspected the bushings. For those that don't remember, my first episode, I think I covered, I have CHE, Che, trunnion upgrade. So they remove the limiting factory trunnion, and this one here can spin a full 360. It's actually limited by the bolt now, but as you can see, you can spin 360. So with a high lift cam or any other cam, you're not maxing out your trunnion, which will cause this to snap off of the threaded boss that these ride on. That's part of the head. But inspected these, pulled a few of them, and I've never pulled any. These bushings in here are brass, and I've never pulled or seen any brass flakes in the oil, indicating that these have significant wear, and they didn't seem to show any significant wear. So I'm going to go ahead and keep running these. I've inspected quite a bit, and I've kind of oiled all these to get them nice and ready for reinstallation. But that's where we stand there. But I'm going to kind of come over here and let's talk about something else that I think may be another issue on why I was losing oil pressure and it was not going up the heads. So let's see if I can get a good... This here is the valley cover. I was still running the factory valley cover. This is the underside. This sits in the center of the engine. So here's the top side. This area here is where the high pressure fuel pump goes. So the Gen 5 LT is direct injected. So it has a mechanical fuel pump that sits here, is driven off the cam. Here is the oil port. So oil comes up from the pump. This is the oil pressure sensor. And this is basically where it gets its pressure reading. Well, oil is also allowed to travel through this center part. It actually comes through the center, comes through here. This is called the VLOM. I forget what it's called now. Variable lifter oiling mechanism, maybe. I think that's what it is. Don't quote me on that. I'm not even going to look it up, but basically this is not being utilized. This is what controls displacement on demand for the L83, or let's say the 15 to 18, 19 generation of Gen 5 LTs. After that, they switched to DFM for dynamic fuel management. It has a different system than this, but this was an 18 engine. This had AFM, active fuel management. So it actually has these VLOM solenoids. So there's 4 solenoids in here, one for each cylinder that gets deactivated during displacement on demand. And as you can see, there's 2 ports. So that's for the 2 lifters for that cylinder. I forget which cylinders it is. It's been a while since I've looked into this. I think 7 is the last one. So probably 7. This would be the other side. So probably, let's see if this is 8. So 6, 4, 1 maybe. So let's say 1, 4, 6, 7. I think that's what it is, but don't quote me on that. But anyways, the way this works is oil pressure comes in here, oil runs into through here, and it just kind of sits in here. And when displacement on demand is activated, the solenoid opens up, shoots oil out these 2 ports, which goes down those towers that I showed you on the top of the engine that are plugged. And then that goes down to the lifters, and that's what essentially shuts those lifters off to close off that combustion chamber and basically deactivate. It's part of the deactivation system. So you have 4 solenoids here, and basically they hold the oil pressure back. Don't allow it to come here until it is activated and trying to turn off cylinders for economy. So the way this works is oil would come through this port and basically pressurize in here. And once these open, it comes out here. Well, some of these are leaking. So the way you tell is, let's see if I could do this one-handed. You're probably going to hear some oil come off, but you can shoot compressed air in here. And if you look, you can see oil. Let me turn off my air compressor. You could see some air was pushing out of here. It also pushes out of this one pretty bad. Let's see if I can get a shot of that one, because that one's about the worst. You can see it on the top side of that. I I'd say these two are probably pretty bad. This one is very, very little. I think a little bit could come out, like a tiny, tiny bit, but essentially it looks like probably about 3 of these are leaking pretty bad. So what does that mean? So one of my hypotheses is that I have oil coming in through here. It's supposed to basically just stay in here, not come out here. Well, I think these solenoids are leaking, so it's bleeding off oil pressure. It should be hitting the plug in the tower, but I think it's actually spraying out of here. You know, because you could see that it was bubbling here and here. You know, this is all supposed to be sealed to that tower. So there should be, the oil should essentially just stay in here, but it's actually bleeding out underneath this plate right here. The only way to replace all this is to basically buy a whole new cover. But I'm not running displacement on demand. I have a cam that deletes that system, which is why I have the LS lifters. So I found a guy. He's on YouTube. You can look him up. I think he's Crazed Performance Repair or something like that. I don't remember. If you search VLOM issues or VLOM repair, you'll run across his video. It's pretty popular. He sells a couple of parts through his website. One of those is actually a plug. You actually put it in from the top, but essentially it goes right here. So this thing comes out. There's the oil pressure sensor. So this comes out, and you can install a plug that will go down in here, and you can kind of see the hole right there where it goes through this valley system. And essentially his plug will plug that and basically just keep oil in here to show pressure, and doesn't allow it to go through this channel system, therefore essentially eliminating any oil from coming in here. So I should not have oil leaking off of here, which I'm hoping is what my pressure issue is, based on when I pulled this apart, there was actually a lot of oil coming out of here, indicating that it has bypassed this solenoid. I believe it was these back two. It may even have been this one that had quite a bit of oil coming out of those sealed areas where there shouldn't have been. There shouldn't have been oil. This was cleaned pretty well when I put this engine back together, so that was indicating that these were actually getting oil even after the DoD delete, and that's been deleted the whole time since I've built this engine. But I'm going to go ahead and do the plug. That's a part that I have. It's in the house right now, so when I start reassembling, which should be next weekend, maybe the weekend after, but I'm going to start trying to assemble some of it next weekend. I've kind of got a lot of things going on with the holidays, but we'll be putting the cap in there. We'll be plugging that hole, so we'll be eliminating oil from getting in here. We will put the new lifters in. I've cleaned everything. Let's see, what else am I replacing? I did buy a new oil pump just in case. So a new oil pump will be getting installed. Let's see. I'm trying to think what else I replaced. Of course, the cam retainer plate. Let's come up here and look. So see, there's the towers that those sit on. And that's where the oil would get blocked off for the DoD delete, where the plugs are. So I've already installed the plugs, but there shouldn't even be oil getting there to begin with from that VLOM. Let's see. I've done a bunch of cleaning. The heads are clean. I've cleaned the threads on the block for the heads. I still have to clean the gasket surface for the head gaskets, so that's going to be done next weekend. So next weekend will be a little bit more cleaning before I start doing like the full-on reassemble. And then we'll get this thing back on the road. But yeah, that's kind of the update for now. I plan on getting this. I'm not going to fully reassemble this until I know for sure that the push rods are getting oil. So the next week or two, I'm planning on getting this at least assembled to the point that I can crank it with the oiling system completely closed off. So there still may not be the trans in. I probably won't have the intake on. I probably won't have the fuel rails back in. But I'm going to have it at least to the point where I can crank it with the starter, cycle oil through it, and see if they start coming up the push rods. Once I verify that's good, then it's going to be full-on reassemble mode. Get this thing back driving down the road, and then hopefully that's my issue and nothing else pops up, and I'll go ahead and continue tidying up the tune and start ripping down the road and hopefully get back on the trails. But just wanted to kind of do some updates and keep everybody updated on what's going on, what these issues are. I'd like to comment that these issues that are occurring at the moment are not having anything to do with the actual swap project. As far as I'm considering, and basically I know I'm continuing episodes that this is part of the swap, but I want to kind of document like the things that I'm going through. But, you know, if I didn't have issues with this engine, you know, that's kind of the nature of getting a used engine that you don't know the history of. Is sometimes there's things that pop up, you know, sometimes you get faulty parts, sometimes, you know, things just pop up, but this is in no way associated to the swap per se. As of now, I'm considering that this swap has been done. At least the mechanical aspect, you know, the tuning, I won't really count that because that's obviously been halted because of some of the issues that I've had. But as far as the actual swap and getting the swap to work, that's essentially been done for at least a year. You know, I was driving this thing last Christmas, and it's almost Christmas now. I think we're in November now. I was driving this last year at Christmas time. That's when I installed the high marks. I think I did that in a video, but when the high marks were installed, this thing was fully drivable. Driving down the street, the tune wasn't 100%, but as far as the actual mechanical aspect of the swap, it was done and running and perfectly fine. So I'm going to consider these last episodes, probably ever since the I'll call it since the high marks were installed, are essentially just issues that have popped up due to either parts or you know, just the downfall of dealing with a used engine that you don't know the history of. And I didn't specifically go, you know, 100% deep down into this thing when I got it. I was informed that it only had 18,000 miles, so I made the assumption that some things I did not have to replace that I probably should have because of it having the low miles, and I just assumed they were good. But that's the nature of the beast. I'm not going to harp on it. My big thing now is I just want to get this thing back on the road. That way I can keep enjoying it and get back on the trails and have some fun. But yeah, I just want to make a note of that, you know, those that think that this is the ongoing saga of, you know, this swap not working, that's not the case at all. It's more of, you know, if I had bought a crate motor brand new, where I basically stripped this thing all the way down to the bare block and had it all machined, and, you know, the rotating assembly was all new, and I basically replaced every part on this thing, we would not be here. But that's not the type of budget I had. That's not the type of thing I wanted to do at the time. You know, the nice thing is these things have kind of popped up, you know, a little slowly as things have progressed. So it's not like I've had to dump, you know, I do all this stuff myself, so the labor is essentially free. It just costs me my time. But, you know, I've had to dump some money into some parts, but it's nowhere near, you know, what it would cost if I had a shop doing this. You know, obviously taking an engine down to here is going to be a substantial labor cost, but parts wise, it's actually not that expensive. So, you know, if I just took this down to inspect everything, I'd only basically be paying for some head gaskets and some RTV, which is maybe 150 bucks. But, you know, I bought a few other things. The Johnson lifters, those are about a $750 part, but I figured I'd rather buy those than spend the $300 just to test out lifters that I may still potentially have to replace. But that's where we're at. I just wanted to kind of discuss that and say, you know, this has nothing to do with the actual swap project and issues that come up if you were to perform a swap project. This is more of just, you know, the issues of dealing with used parts and some faulty parts, because I covered it in a previous video, but I did have a lot of issues pop up with my O2 sensors. I don't know why that focus is going out. But yeah, I've covered that in a previous video. I had some issues with O2 sensors causing some tuning issues and some lean conditions, and that was due to faulty brand new parts that I had bought. They were not OEM, as far as not GM. They were an aftermarket OE quality part, but they were not very good. I had bought a new one. The new one failed instantly. Finally found some GM ones, because that was another issue, was trying to find GM parts. I found the GM part, put it in there, and it's been golden ever since. So learned my lesson there. Anything I've bought for this from since then has been a genuine OE part. You know, this cam retainer plate, that's GM. I bought all new bolts. Those are all GM. Nothing I'm putting on to do this kind of go through is going to be a non GM part, unless it's something that's aftermarket as far as performance wise. Like, obviously the cam is not GM. But I digress. I'm going to go ahead and end here since I'm starting to babble. And I will probably post the next video will be when I have this thing back together, at least to the point that it's oiling the push rods, and kind of give an update there as far as, you know, hey, we're good, or no, we're not, and we're going to have to figure something else out. I have contemplated that. What happens if I do get this thing reassembled and the oil still does not come up the push rods? And I think at that point, I may be looking at pulling the whole engine out and possibly just going 6.2. I hope it doesn't come to that point. But if I have to pull this engine out because it's still not oiling up the push rods, I am going to be at the point that I don't want to deal with this engine anymore. So I will just get a 6.2. I do have, so I think I've covered it, but basically the way that I've built this thing is this is easily upgradable to the 6.2. So that is a 6.2 intake manifold, 6.2 throttle body. These manifolds fit on a 6.2. Basically, the only thing that I would need to replace to run a 6.2 is the block, heads, valley cover, possibly fuel pump. I'd have to double check the part number, but the fuel pump may be different for the high pressure. But basically I could buy a short block, which is basically heads, block, valley cover, fuel pump, fuel injectors with the fuel rails, and switch it out, and I would have a 6.2. So if we get to that point, which fingers crossed we don't, I will likely try to source a 6.2 block and heads, try to get the feeling for it too, and then I will probably just yank this thing out and throw that in there. Probably cam swap that too, because a lot of the parts will fit on there. So if I do that, I will technically only have to buy probably the cam, and then I can just switch all the parts over. The trunnions and the dual valve springs, titanium, all that junk on the heads, that all will switch over to a 6.2. Push rods I may have to get. The lifters, those can run in the 6.2. So essentially, if I cam that, I would just need the cam and probably a few miscellaneous things. So that will occur if that happens. But fingers crossed that it doesn't. We'll continue with this one for now and hope that this was the issue and possibly the lifters. And once we plug this thing, plug that hole, and replace the lifters, we will be all good and back on the road. So I'll see you guys on the next one.